At exactly 2:48 a.m., while most of Ouagadougou slept, an extraordinary military operation was silently unfolding in the heart of the city. Elite special forces under the command of President Ibrahim Traoré were moving into position, targeting a highly prestigious office building that housed the international NGO known as the African Development Initiative. To the outside world, it was just another humanitarian organization, one of many offering aid, education, and development to West Africa. But to Traoré's intelligence services, it was something far more sinister. This was no random operation. It was the result of weeks of intense surveillance, satellite monitoring, and intercepted communications. Every movement, every delivery truck, every meeting in that building had been watched. And what the intelligence teams discovered behind closed doors would not only change Burkina Faso's destiny, it would spark a geopolitical firestorm across the African continent. Inside that building, soldiers expected to find files, perhaps some computers, and NGO staff going about their routine. What they found instead were military-grade encrypted devices, blueprints of government installations, and a weapons cache fit for a small army. This wasn't just a case of corruption or foreign meddling, it was something far more dangerous. A carefully orchestrated campaign of espionage, destabilization, and propaganda, hidden beneath the mask of benevolence. What began as a silent raid would soon echo across the world stage. Within hours, a press conference would reveal a trove of documents implicating one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world, the CIA, in a covert campaign to overthrow the government of Burkina Faso. This is the story of the night the truth was uncovered. The night Africa opened its eyes. The operation did not begin on the night of the raid, it began weeks earlier in the shadows. Suspicion had been growing within President Ibrahim Traoré's inner circle. Despite the African Development Initiative's glowing reputation in international circles, whispers of unusual activity had started to surface. Local intelligence officers noticed irregular financial transactions, unexplained shipments arriving in diplomatic containers, and a suspiciously high turnover of foreign staff with military backgrounds. At first, the president ordered discreet surveillance. Teams were assigned to monitor the NGO's daily operations, review satellite imagery of its compound, and intercept suspicious communication signals. It quickly became clear that what appeared to be a center for humanitarian work was actually operating under an extraordinary level of secrecy. None of the field workers were seen interacting with the local population. Meetings were frequent, closed-door, and often included unfamiliar foreign visitors arriving with diplomatic immunity. Then came the breakthrough. Cybersecurity experts hacked into a server believed to be associated with the organization. What they found was alarming: encrypted folders labeled Ops, Sahel, Assets, BF, and Stage 3 Activation. These terms did not belong in the lexicon of humanitarian aid. The documents hinted at coordinated political interference, surveillance of government officials, and possible plans for regime change. President Traoré assembled a trusted inner team. The decision was clear: this NGO needed to be unmasked. But the raid had to be flawless. 3 teams were formed, one to breach the front entrance, another to secure the rear exits, and a third to descend from the rooftop. No communication would be leaked. No backup would be called unless necessary. The target was to seize all documents, secure all digital devices, and detain any personnel linked to covert operations. This was not just about defending a government, it was about defending a nation's sovereignty. As the clock struck 2:48 a.m., the streets around the African Development Initiative building fell eerily silent. The electricity to the building had been discreetly cut moments before. Surveillance cameras were disabled with surgical precision. 3 special forces teams, clad in night vision gear and armed with silenced weapons, moved into position. The first team approached the front entrance with stealth, expertly picking the lock without a sound. The second team secured the rear, ensuring no escape route remained. Meanwhile, the third team rappelled silently from the rooftop, entering through an upper-level window. Every step was synchronized. Every second mattered. Inside, the building was dimly lit by emergency lights. Despite being labeled an aid office, the interior layout resembled a command center more than a humanitarian workspace. Instead of posters of clean water projects or school programs, the walls displayed large maps of Burkina Faso, military maps, with base coordinates, security perimeters, and troop movement patterns. The first shock came when soldiers entered what should have been the communications room. Instead of basic NGO radio equipment, they found encrypted satellite phones, data servers, and classified encryption terminals. One sergeant, visibly stunned, called over the radio, "Commander, you need to see this with your own eyes." President Traore, who had positioned himself nearby for real-time oversight, entered the building within minutes. His face hardened as he observed the technology scattered before him, technology no aid organization had any business possessing. He gave the order, "Collect everything. Not a single page leaves this building unseen." As teams moved room by room, more disturbing discoveries followed. Personnel dossiers containing personal information about Burkina Faso's top political and military figures, including family details and psychological profiles. Files labeled Target 1, Ibrahim Traoré, included surveillance notes so detailed they documented his breakfast habits and childhood stories. One hidden compartment in a cabinet revealed perhaps the most explosive evidence of all, official documents stamped with the seal of the CIA. The most damning among them was titled Operation Desert Storm Bina, and outlined, step by step, a campaign to destabilize Traoré's government through economic pressure, media manipulation, civil unrest, and military intervention. The signature at the bottom read, Michael Harrison, CIA Africa Operations. Traoré stared at the document in silence. The evidence was irrefutable. This was no longer a case of foreign interference, it was an act of war hidden beneath the mask of international aid. With each room searched, the image became clearer, this was not an aid organization. It was a fully functioning intelligence hub. What began as suspicions had now become a flood of undeniable evidence. The secure filing cabinets were packed with documents that seemed to come straight from an intelligence agency. One document, stamped Top Secret, outlined the details of Operation Desert Storm Bina, a step-by-step plan to overthrow the Burkinabe government. It wasn't theoretical. It included detailed timelines, assigned operatives, and even budget allocations. Phase 1, apply economic pressure through sanctions and currency destabilization. Phase 2, launch a coordinated media campaign to erode trust in Traoré's leadership. Phase 3, trigger popular uprisings using local influencers and planted agitators. Phase 4, military intervention under the pretext of restoring stability. The final page contained a signature, Michael Harrison, CIA Africa Operations Director. But it didn't stop there. Another thick folder was labeled Burkina Faso Political Map. Inside, soldiers found files on every major political figure in the country. Each file contained not only biographical data but also detailed psychological assessments, financial vulnerabilities, and family secrets. The purpose was clear, to manipulate, blackmail, or neutralize. President Traoré's own file was a disturbing revelation. Labeled Target Number 1, it included his daily routines, the restaurants he frequented, names of childhood friends, even personal anecdotes from his teenage years. No legitimate aid organization would ever compile such invasive profiles. Only long-term surveillance could produce this level of detail. Then came the most devastating document, a file labeled Local Assets. It was a list of Burkinabe citizens secretly working for the CIA. The names ranged from prominent businesspeople and academics to journalists and even government officials. Each entry included a code name, monthly payment, from $5,000 to $20,000, and a specific role, media manipulation, intelligence gathering, logistics. One name, receiving the highest salary, held a top-level government position. "This list threatens not just our government," Traore said grimly, "but the stability of all Africa." He immediately ordered it secured, encrypted, and removed from the building under armed guard. The operation then moved to the Digital Command Center. A cybersecurity expert decrypted real-time communication logs that exposed direct links between the NGO and CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Dozens of emails and voice messages revealed daily updates, surveillance reports, and operational orders. The last message, received just 3 hours before the raid, read, "Traore has moved. Accelerate the operation." The message confirmed what Traore already suspected: there were still informants embedded within his own administration. The spies were feeding the CIA with live updates, compromising national security at every step. And still, the nightmare wasn't over. In the building's basement, soldiers uncovered a fully stocked weapons depot. Crates of assault rifles, sniper weapons, grenades, and rocket launchers were neatly stored and catalogued. When serial numbers were checked, most traced back to U.S. military inventory. One document titled "Coup d'etat" outlined plans to distribute these weapons to opposition groups, create citywide chaos, and then request a U.S. military intervention under humanitarian pretenses. "This is the African version of regime change," one commander remarked. "It's Libya all over again, just better disguised." As the troops ascended to the upper floors, another chilling discovery awaited: a biological lab. Locked behind reinforced doors, the lab contained petri dishes, virus cultures, and genetic samples labeled specifically for Burkinabe ethnic groups. Project files showed that the lab had been developing gene-targeted biological agents, weapons designed to harm local populations while minimizing impact on foreigners. The project name was printed in bold across several folders: Africa Genetic Targeting. President Traore, holding one of the documents in his hand, looked visibly shaken. "This isn't just espionage," he said. "This is genocide." The operation in Burkina Faso was only the tip of the iceberg. As forensic teams sifted through more digital files, the broader architecture of a Pan-African espionage network began to emerge. Multiple folders contained intelligence reports, mission briefings, and coded correspondence not just about Burkina Faso, but about operations in at least 4 other countries: Mali, Niger, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. Each country had its own file, complete with maps, target lists, infiltration plans, and destabilization strategies. These were not vague ideas or preliminary research. They were fully developed playbooks for regime change. In the Mali file, the title read, "Operation Sahel Freedom." The plan called for the fragmentation of Mali into smaller regions, particularly in the north, where a new puppet state would be established under the pretense of ethnic self-determination. A U.S. military base was planned for the newly liberated zone. The operation appeared to be in motion, as several events outlined in the file had already occurred. The Niger file contained even more troubling information. Codenamed Operation Yellow Cake, it revealed a strategy to seize control of Niger's uranium mines. The objective was to wrest control away from French mining corporations and transfer ownership to American companies through covert political manipulation and pressure. A staggering $10 billion budget had been allocated for this single operation alone, indicating just how high the stakes were. Ghana and Ivory Coast had similar blueprints. One file focused on establishing media control, while another emphasized the use of civil society organizations to gradually influence election outcomes and tilt public opinion. Even more disturbing were the detailed records of personnel deployment. Each country had embedded agents posing as NGO workers, development consultants, or academic researchers. Some had been stationed for years. Their roles were carefully categorized: asset recruitment, election interference, military infiltration. Back in Burkina Faso, the cybersecurity team discovered that all field offices of the African Development Initiative were networked into a central command, transmitting daily updates to a server in Langley. The communications included encrypted instructions from higher-ups, detailed logs of local political activities, and requests for funds or personnel reinforcements. As the puzzle pieces connected, a sobering truth became undeniable: this was not an isolated case. The African Development Initiative was the logistical backbone of a covert continent-wide operation. Its structure, resources, and coordination were consistent with military-grade planning. President Traore stood before the intelligence team and declared, "This is no longer just about Burkina Faso. It is about Africa's right to exist without manipulation." What the soldiers found in the building's lower levels turned the operation from a national security breach into a full-blown international scandal. In the basement, behind a reinforced metal door, was a professionally organized weapons stockpile. Wooden crates stacked floor-to-ceiling bore labels in English, some with NATO serial markings. When the serial numbers were verified, they matched weapons registered to U.S. military supplies: assault rifles, high-powered sniper rifles, grenade launchers, and even shoulder-fired rocket systems. This was not a minor arms cache for security. It was an arsenal designed to fuel armed insurrection. A classified document found nearby, titled "Coup de Logistics," laid out the deployment plan. On the day of the uprising, weapons would be distributed to hand-picked militia groups and armed opposition networks. The document included city maps marked with weapons drop points and time-stamped action sequences. The goal: to create controlled chaos, provoke civil unrest, and then justify foreign intervention to restore order. "This is warfare disguised as charity," muttered one officer. But the revelations didn't end there. Upstairs, on the second floor, investigators uncovered a sealed laboratory, a facility with no business being part of any aid organization. Inside, they found biological samples, chemical compounds, and lab reports written in scientific language beyond the training of most on-site personnel. Lab notebooks and digital logs confirmed a horrifying truth. The lab had been researching genetically targeted biological agents. These were not vaccines or medicines. They were biological weapons designed to exploit genetic markers common in Burkinabe populations, diseases that could decimate locals while minimizing risk to foreigners. The project title on the files was unmistakable: Africa Genetic Targeting. President Traore stood over one of the lab benches, reviewing a document with trembling hands. "This is not espionage," he said quietly. "This is premeditated genocide." His next order was immediate: the lab was to be sealed, its contents documented, and an international team of independent biologists summoned to confirm what had been found. "This evidence," he declared, "must be presented to the world." Beyond the laboratories and weapons, another powerful tool of control was uncovered on the top floor: a media operations center. From the outside, it looked like a basic communications room. Inside, it was a propaganda machine in full swing. Rows of computers managed thousands of fake social media accounts across platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. A central server contained pre-written articles, fake headlines, and manipulated images prepared for distribution. The strategy was clear: shape public perception, control narratives, and destroy reputations. The operation was codenamed Truth Killer. Its targets were obvious. President Ibrahim Traoré was portrayed as a dictator, a thief, and a destabilizing force. Weekly plans outlined specific slanders, forged financial records, invented sex scandals, and economic doomsday headlines such as "Traoré has stolen millions" or "Burkina Faso on the verge of collapse." These stories were not meant for local audiences only. They were formatted for international distribution, specifically to be picked up by foreign media outlets and NGOs. Each false headline was supported by fake interviews, doctored photos, and social media comments planted by bot accounts. "This is how they tried to erase our credibility," Traoré said. "To make us look corrupt while they prepared to take everything." With this revelation, the war for Africa was no longer just physical or political. It was also a war for truth. Among the most damning evidence found during the raid were the financial documents, records that revealed the funding sources behind the entire covert operation. These weren't hidden in offshore accounts or coded messages, they were openly listed under the NGO's financial ledgers, disguised as development grants and capacity-building support. The largest donor was a US-based organization named the Freedom Foundation, contributing over $20 million annually. While branded as a philanthropic institution, the foundation's board included former CIA directors, Pentagon officials, and executives from weapons manufacturers. Their goal: fund operations that served U.S. geopolitical interests under the banner of humanitarianism. The second largest sponsor was a think tank called the Democracy Export Institute, which allocated $15 million to the Burkina Faso operation alone. Their internal memo described the mission as "spreading democracy in Africa," a phrase that now read like a smokescreen for regime engineering. But even more disturbing was the personnel file of the so-called aid workers. None had backgrounds in medicine, education, or humanitarian work. Instead, they were former Navy SEALs, CIA operatives, and covert military specialists. The organization's director, David Miller, was revealed to be a seasoned Special Forces officer with combat experience in Iraq and Libya. Program coordinator, Sarah Johnson, had led intelligence missions in Congo, Sudan, and Somalia for the CIA. "They came not to help," said Traoré. "They came to sabotage, to spy, and to subjugate." By 6 a.m., the operation was complete. Over a dozen agents had been detained, and the building had been secured. What remained was a mountain of physical and digital evidence, enough to rewrite the narrative of foreign aid in Africa. At 10 a.m., President Ibrahim Traoré stood before a packed room of national and international journalists at the presidential palace. His words were calm, but thunderous in their implications. "Dear citizens and members of the world press," he began. "Tonight, we dismantle the largest espionage operation in our country's history, a network hiding behind the name of humanitarian aid, WORKI.